In the aftermath of the 9/11 events, scholars spanning the social sciences have been compelled to reevaluate fundamental assumptions and theoretical commitments. A prominent among these pertains to the concept of state sovereignty within the context of the contemporary world system. The conventional understanding of sovereignty, entwined with the Weberian differentiation between the arbitrary use of force by traditional despots and the legitimate monopoly of violence wielded by representatives of modern centralized states, plays a pivotal role in our conception of the distinct nature of the present interstate framework. This is evident in the fact that, along with an international economy centered around competitive markets, the Westphalian system of states governed by mutual recognition of each other's territorial sovereignty and the rejection of centralized imperial control forms the cornerstone of the modern Euro-American-centered world system, as stated in Wallerstein's influential formulation. In the examined volume, curated by Blom and Finn, a compilation of readings has been assembled with the aim of prompting a reconsideration of the ease with which we assume sovereignty as an inherent and unproblematic attribute of contemporary states. The book appears to engage in a critical conversation with Hard and Negri's empire, which marked a significant challenge to traditional notions of imperial authority by positioning it as decentralized and less readily locatable. While the authors of this book heed Hard and Negri's call to conceptualize sovereignty as decentralized and mobile, they also bring an intent to progress beyond broad theoretical statements. Their focus is productive engagement with local empirical materials that demonstrate how state sovereignty is sustained by both local and translocal connections and flows, maintained through a discontinuous process of iteration and performance. In the introductory chapter, the editors adeptly outline their overarching programmatic perspective. They advocate questioning the obviousness of the state-territory sovereignty link, instead of presupposing sovereignty as an inherent capability of state entities, as often seen in neo-realist approaches in international relations. The volume endeavors to perceive the territorial state and sovereignty as socially constructed entities. Importantly, the editors move beyond the conventional constructivist positions associated with the discursive and narrative construction of international actors' identities and commitments, transcending the focus on the normative logic of appropriateness versus the calculative logic of consequences debate. Their trajectory shifts toward a post-constructivist concern with the micro-level manifestations of state sovereignty. For Hansen and Stepputat, the intricate externalization of power at the level of practices materializes through iterative displays of violence, state authority, and the subjugation of bodies and minds to the civilizing dictates of state actions. These iterations encompass micro-practices of control, physical imposition, bodily regulation, and subconscious conditioning. Here, the authors diverge from the somewhat idealistic tendencies of constructivist theory that occasionally grapple with empirical realities. At the core of this volume, which involves state violence, power abuse, and the internalization of life and death rituals to establish the unassailable authority of the state's legal framework, Hansen and Stepputat have skillfully molded their undertaking into an innovative amalgamation of neo-Spinozist Marxism from Hard and Negri, interwoven with an astute awareness of the necessity to complement this overarching macro-theoretical standpoint with a post-Foucauldian grasp of iteration and performance. Their work delves into the significance of these elements initiated by vested state actors and competing power centers for the establishment of stable and unsettled configurations of state sovereignty. This perspective, while initially introduced by Hard and Negri with regard to the micro-politics of bodies, is honed here into a more comprehensive analytical framework. Yet, for those who perceive this dramaturgical framework as still too closely tethered to post-structuralist preoccupations with language and discourse, a sense of reassurance is warranted. The contributors' meticulous examination of the tangible implications of power imposition by centralized state agents prevents them from falling into the trap of endowing signs with undue importance. Instead, they draw from contemporary reinterpretations of Foucault's later works, particularly his exploration of governmentality and political practices. Additionally, the authors incorporate Bataille's radical sociological perspective, uncovering the violent excess concealed beneath the facade of rational legal authority, as well as Schmitt's notion of the fundamentally illegal foundation of legality, and the differentiation between friend and enemy, citizen and non-citizen, outsider and insider, a performative act that establishes political authority and sovereignty. This theoretical framework is further bolstered by a comprehensive consideration of the historical evolution of ideological systems and institutional practices tied to the concept of state sovereignty. Notably, the book departs from a strictly Euro-centered account of how European states developed their unique perception of sovereignty within the realm of political behavior. Instead, it offers a broader narrative of the European sense of sovereignty's performative nature, situated within the wider context of the 19th century colonial enterprise. The authors take into account the complex dynamic of importing and exporting procedures, institutional practices, and sovereignty-related ideas between metropolitan centers and colonial outposts, a process in which Benedict Anderson's pioneering work holds considerable significance. They illustrate how Europe's distinct political project could only arise by contrasting and practicing exclusion through the existence of colonial territories, which, much like the criminal body in Foucault's Discipline and Punish, presents the proper inversion of the colonial center's representation of the sublime king. The authors convincingly argue that colonies were more than static points of comparison or symbolic elements merely bolstering European identity. Instead, they functioned as real-life laboratories, wherein the European metropolis's liberalizing drive towards citizenship was augmented by an authentic laboratory, where alternative practices, often deeply violent and illiberal, were developed within the colonial framework. Indigenous populations were relegated to the status of quasi-citizens, denied the full array of rights and freedoms granted to the European core. This perspective underscores the critical significance of comprehending not only the Euro-American experience of political exceptionalism, but also the contemporary landscape of fragmented and diverse forms of sovereignty, pervasive in post-colonial regions, such as Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. These post-colonial sovereignties represent reflexive late-modern attempts to impose sovereignty and control products of the blending of European colonizers' notions of their rights and their realization that complete subjugation of indigenous populations, devoid of mediation by local elites, was unattainable. The result is a mix of regimes of sovereignty, often marked by both violence and creativity, dispersed throughout the post-colonial world. These regimes feature an intricate competition between state, civil, and economic centers of sovereignty, often overlapping and entwined, while influenced by widening circles of neo-imperial dominance, stemming from the U.S. core and global flows of capital, labor, currency, and technology. This intricate interplay forms a patchwork of fluctuating and intersecting zones and cycles of order and disorder, a complex creation and response to the colonial experience. Themes related to the precarious nature of citizen identities and the performative aspect of state authority permeate numerous contributions within the book. The volume commences with historical and cultural examinations of racial and ethnic identities, particularly how they intersect with issues of status and class in post-colonial settings like Mexico and Peru. Partha Chatterjee's exploration of political society as a counterweight to the Western scholarship's division between politics and civil society follows, presenting the notion that this model might not readily apply to post-colonial state entities. Political society emerges as a mixed domain, where issues of governance and daily life blend without clear separation. This point is exemplified through a study of conflicts between government agents and local religious groups in India. Navro Yashin's concept of borders of the imagination is introduced to decipher how state boundaries and authority are enacted through state rituals in the Turkish Republic of North Cyprus. Other contributions, such as those by Lars Buer and Stephen Jensen, delve into the grassroots restructuring of coercive authority, focusing on local police forces and neighborhood watch groups in states like South Africa, marked by weakness or corruption. These chapters underscore the role of violence in reinstating a semblance of order and morality on the local level, intertwined with complex interactions between ethnic, religious, and the Komarov's exploration of discourse regarding invasive plant species in South Africa uncovers parallels between these declarations and xenophobic sentiments toward immigrant populations. This naturalization of the nation through botanical analogies reflects an alternative means of reinforcing the racist undertones of national sovereignty and citizenship. Another recurring theme is the questioning of individual citizenship and the concept of a distinct civil society under the context of decentered imperial dominance. Barry Hindus, in a compelling section introduction, engages with Hard and Negri's perspective, revealing their implicit retention of a traditional notion of citizenship centered on intrastatal connections between rulers and citizens. Hindus suggests expanding this to encompass a supranational governmental regime involving international organizations, transnational corporations, and regulatory entities. The subsequent chapters delve into these themes further. Iwa Ong employs the concept of cosmopolitan citizenship to explore patterns of residence and exchange between Vancouver and Hong Kong. Peter van der Veer examines India's engagement in the global economy through labor export, illustrating complex connections between national identity, religion, and capitalism. Øyvind Fuglerud traces shifts in Norwegian national identity amidst globalization, exploring its integration into the global system, while safeguarding its boundaries from external migration. Simon Turner contributes insights into suspended spaces, investigating how state sovereignty becomes suspended within spaces like internment camps, where special populations fall under overlapping regimes of management and authority. Overall, the book offers a comprehensive overview of contemporary theory and research at the juncture of globalization, citizenship studies, international relations theory, anthropology, and political sociology. As characteristic of works emerging during paradigm shifts, this volume introduces novel concepts, reinvigorates established ideas, and formulates radical reconstructions, some of which prove more immediately applicable than others.